West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
So Glenn, we touched on a really interesting topic in our last episode that I want to expand upon a bit here. So let's say that the Supreme Court's immunity ruling impacts all of Donald Trump's ongoing prosecutions in D.C., Florida, Georgia, and New York. I want to talk about whether Trump could still be prosecuted if some of the issues presented by the immunity ruling are fixed, if they're remedied. So I want to start with Florida here, and this is the issue that we talked about in the last video, but let's reiterate. Clarence Thomas dropped a little Easter egg, an advisory opinion in his immunity opinion, suggesting that special counsels are unconstitutional, which is, of course, the issue that Trump's attorneys raised in their latest motion to dismiss. How could that be remedied if, for example, the court finds that, yes, indeed, special counsels are unconstitutional?
Yeah, and not just an Easter egg, Brian. It's like Clarence Thomas sent the Easter Bunny down into Judge Cannon's chambers and said, just dismiss the damn case. I've got your back. Okay, that concludes the comedy portion of my comments. Look, all hope is not lost. That is the top line message I want to send to everybody. All hope is not lost. Cases will be prosecuted, provided Donald Trump doesn't get reelected, because then, in my estimation, no cases will be prosecuted. But okay, so let's take a look at what the Supreme Court did and what the implications are down in Florida. First of all, Clarence Thomas said, you know what, Judge Cannon, I'm not so sure special counsel Jack Smith was lawfully appointed. Here is, I don't want to bury the lead. He was. Special counsel and independent counsel, laws, statutes, and regulations have been used in the United States in the criminal justice system since the 1800s. Courts, one after another, have ruled on the legality of those laws and procedures, and they have always been upheld, including Bob Mueller's appointment as special counsel. So Jack Smith's appointment as special counsel, absolutely lawful and constitutional. But what happens if Judge Cannon rules that, you know what, I'm going to go with Justice Thomas's suggestion and just say Jack Smith was not legally appointed, therefore he can't prosecute this case? Couple of things will happen. First and foremost, Jack Smith will appeal. Then the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, which sits atop Judge Cannon and has reversed her before for abusing her discretion in Donald Trump's favor, will reverse her. But then, of course, Donald Trump will appeal it to where? The United States Supreme Court. And Brian, I can no longer predict, and I think it's a fool's errand to even try, what the Supreme Court will do with any case that has Donald Trump in the caption, United States of America versus Donald Trump. What they should do is say, like every other court in the land that has addressed this, Jack Smith's appointment was lawful and constitutional. Will they? I just don't know. So that's one thing. It will go all the way up the appellate chain to the Supreme Court, and they will ultimately have to decide. But you know what? There's always some silver lining, because I believe both Jack Smith and the Department of Justice, for all my beating up on the Department of Justice, I still believe that they are in it for the long game. And I do believe we're going to be talking about Donald Trump prosecutions for years to come. So let's assume the Supreme Court said, you know what? We're going to side with Judge Cannon over all of the other judges who have decided this issue, and say Jack Smith was not lawfully appointed. Then the Department of Justice steps back, and then they put a new team of prosecutors who are not designated as special counsel on the case, and they pick up where they left off. Because even though I promise you Donald Trump will argue in the event Jack Smith's appointment is deemed illegal, he'll argue that every investigative step Jack Smith took has to be undone, thrown out, ignored, and the Department of Justice has to start from jump. That will not be the case. Instead, new prosecutors will pick up right where Jack Smith left off, and they will continue to move forward in the Florida criminal prosecution against Donald Trump. All of that is my best guess, having lived in the Department of Justice for decades as a career federal prosecutor.
Okay, so that's one very acceptable remedy here in the catastrophic event that Judge Cannon and the Supreme Court rule that a special counsel is unconstitutional. The other issue in Florida is that Trump will say that merely taking a document, which of course is illegal, is somehow an official act, which would, be an insane position. But if a court finds that he is correct and agrees with this insane position, then what is the remedy to that?
Now we are back on the appellate track. If Judge Cannon rules that Donald Trump's stealing, we're going to call it what it is, because when you take the property that belongs to another without the legal right to take that property, it's theft, it's larceny, it can be called a number of different things. Donald Trump stole those documents from the government. They weren't his diaries, which might, give him some play under the PRA, the Presidential Records Act. The president can take his diaries, but all records belong to the federal government, and a president can't take them. But if Judge Cannon says, you know what, I am deciding these were official acts, all of the documents he stole from the federal government when he left the presidency. Again, Jack Smith would appeal, and in a normal world, when we're not living in the legal upside down, ultimately the 11th Circuit would overrule and overturn Judge Cannon yet again and remand it back to her with instructions that, no, Judge, you're wrong again, and these were not official acts when Donald Trump stole these classified documents. Then, as we already discussed, Donald Trump would beat feet to the Supreme Court, and it's always anybody's guess. But if they ever choose to be honest brokers of the law, they will say that, no, stealing things from the federal government, even when a president does it, is not an official act that enjoys absolute or presumptive presidential immunity. So that's what would happen. But let's take it one step further. Let's assume the Supreme Court says, yep, stealing classified documents and military attack plans on foreign countries represents an official act of the presidency. A president gets to do it. Fine. Then what happens is the other criminal charges in the case moving forward, like obstructing justice for defying a grand jury subpoena, which is a court order requiring the return of those classified documents while you're a private citizen, because Donald Trump had left the presidency by the time he received that subpoena. There's no way that could be an official presidential act that enjoys any level of immunity. So all hope is not lost, because even in the worst case scenario, where Judge Cannon gets it wrong to try to help Donald Trump, the Supreme Court gets it wrong to try to help Donald Trump, there are still remaining criminal charges that will proceed to trial. So that is why we all have to hang in there.
Okay, so that's two bits of good news in what would be very catastrophic situations in this classified documents case down in Florida. Let's move over to New York, because, obviously the immunity ruling has pushed back sentencing a couple of months. So in New York, the issue is that even though Donald Trump's falsification of business records was during his time as a candidate, that is why he falsified business records to hide a hush money payout, because he thought that the affair would hurt him in the upcoming election, he did sign reimbursement checks from the White House. So Donald Trump is going to say that it's an official act just by virtue of the fact that it occurred in the White House. And that's obviously flatly false, but it'll be up to the court's discretion, including the Supreme Court, to determine whether or not that's true. So what is the remedy here if let's just skip the initial steps and jump to the Supreme Court and say the Supreme Court were to decide that the reimbursement checks, for example, are inadmissible?
Yeah, if you'll indulge me, I will skip forward because I don't want to repeat what we've already talked about. But let me tell you, there is no rational view of the world, I believe, even in the Supreme Court, that will result in reimbursement checks reimbursing Michael Cohen for paying off the porn star to help Donald Trump cheat in the 2016 presidential election. You know, even beyond stealing classified documents, no way. No way. Even the Supreme Court, in my opinion, I'm going on that fool's errand now, no way they will hold that was an official presidential act and enjoys immunity. But now let's go right to your...
You got Clarence Thomas waiting in the wings here going, you sure? You sure? Like, try me, you know?
Hold my beer,
Hold my
Clarence
beer,
says.
exactly.
Yeah. But let's go to the end game. Let's assume that the Supreme Court says, yup, reimbursing your fixer for paying off a porn star to try to cheat in a presidential election all enjoys presidential immunity. Why? Because at the moment you were signing the checks, you were now, sworn in as president of the United States. Insane even hearing myself say it. But let's assume that's what the Supreme Court says. Here's the good news. Always a little bit of silver lining. We're not being Pollyanna here. There's a doctrine in the appellate law called harmless error. What does that mean? There was a mountain of evidence against Donald Trump in the New York prosecution from David Pecker and Stormy Daniels and Hope Hicks and so many others. There were falsified records. There were phone records and messages. There was testimony of Michael Cohen. There was an undercover recording of Donald Trump basically saying, we're going to do this dirty criminal thing when he was talking with Michael Cohen. A mountain of evidence. The reason I recite all that, Brian, is because in virtually every trial, and I can say this for every case I prosecuted in 30 years, mistakes are made. There are mistakes made in every criminal trial because the system is populated by human beings and we're all fallible. So anytime there's a conviction that gets appealed, the appellate courts will look to the doctrine of harmless error. What does that mean? It means they look at all of the mistakes that were conducted during the course of the trial and they will decide, were those harmless errors or were they prejudicial and did they result in a conviction when, if the errors had not been committed, the defendant would have been found not guilty? I'm taking some liberties with the test just to sort of illustrate the point. Writing reimbursement checks at the very end of this long conspiracy that he was in with Michael Cohen is, if it's an error based on this new Supreme Court opinion that a president is king, it's harmless. It's harmless because there's a mountain of evidence that otherwise supports the conviction of Donald Trump in the New York case. So that's where the silver lining comes in.
Right, that makes total sense. And now let's finally bunch DC and Georgia together because they both concern undermining the 2020 election. So the situation here is a little different because we're in the pretrial period. So can you talk about what will happen if certain evidence or certain charges are found to be improper based on the immunity ruling?
Yeah, Brian, I think in some ways the news is even better when we talk about the Georgia prosecution and the DC prosecution because they are both in pre-trial status. There has not been a trial yet, and they both have honest judges, fair, impartial, independent judges, Judge Tanya Chutkan in DC, Judge Scott McAfee down in Georgia. So here's what will happen in those cases. They will look at the Supreme Court ruling and they will litigate pre-trial the issues that the Supreme Court ruling has now dropped in their lap, whether the evidence should be admitted against Donald Trump because it was either an official act that does not enjoy presumptive immunity or it was an unofficial act. And there's going to be a mixture of official acts, but Jack Smith will be able to or Fani Willis will be able to overcome the presumption of immunity beyond the scope of today's legal breakdown discussion, or they'll just be deemed unofficial acts because he was basically like a candidate trying to retain the office of the presidency after he lost. So I think there's really reason to be optimistic that criminal charges will absolutely survive in both D.C. and in Georgia and will go to trial, provided Donald Trump is not elected, notwithstanding this Supreme Court ruling, because those courts and those judges have every opportunity to sort it all out in a pretrial status before the trial begins.
Look, I think all of this is especially important to go over because I feel like the overarching feeling right now is just that of despair, of hopelessness, of this sense that Donald Trump yet again got away with it. And I think as we're seeing right now, even in the most catastrophic circumstances where this immunity ruling really ultimately redounds to Trump's benefit in the biggest way, there is still a ton of legal exposure that he's facing, and all is not lost in any of these cases.
It is Monday, the 8th of July of 2024, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, of course, is convalescing during her sickness, and we will be seating you shortly for our especially special, I got to get that extra special in there, daily special River City Hash Mondays. Yes, because we had another weekend, and some people called it a holiday weekend, I guess. Anyway, the flags are still out, and so we did have Independence Day. I can't help but wonder if a lot of people around here think Independence Day means like leaving the United States or making the United States become their own private Idaho. Jesus. Oh my God. We've had a heat wave here, and of course, I have a stuffy nose. I think it's the mix of the grass pollen. Maybe it's the grass pollen that's hitting me, but something's been hitting me, and that doesn't feel like a summer cold. It feels more scratchy and, like pollen. Okay. So it goes. Anyway, yes, we've had quite a heat wave. We'll get into that in a moment. But, yes, the Epstein files get dropped, and all the usual suspects around here who kept saying that pedophile Joe is gonna be just decimated. They didn't use the word decimated because they don't know what it means. But I do, because I'm editing the story as I say it. Anyway, they were absolutely convinced that Joe would have to leave the race and be hounded into oblivion because of the Epstein logs. They kept calling for the Epstein logs to be dropped. Why aren't they being dropped? Oh, I don't know. Ask Trump. He's the one that made the deal with Acosta. Who's Acosta? See, they don't even know what the hell is going on. Anyway, radio silence. Yep. So that's cool. We got the anti-public school guy doing his thing. I don't understand very much about how one can have a single issue. And they're not really single issues. We'll call it a single issue of MAGA. Okay, whatever that entails. Who will come on and espouse MAGA. And then call everybody else unneighborly because they disagree with a dick. Excuse my French in the morning. And I know I shouldn't blame it on the French. I shouldn't. But that's the phrase, and I'm using it for now. Anyway, these people never post puppy photos. They never post a question about where to get a bundle of lavender. They never post anything about welcoming new members to the group. They never post anything that in the most convoluted, distant way could be construed as neighborly. But they'll come on and say, this is what your government school's doing to your kid. They're indoctrinating your kid with leftist ideology. Oh, really? Well, it's true. As if it's new that anybody would think that a school's doing indoctrinating in a school. The idea of part of the public educational system in America is to make the little kids into good citizens. And of course, to the MAGA, that's in the eye of the beholder, because a good citizen to them is somebody who would go beat the crap out of somebody because they disagreed with them. Oh, we didn't get our way? Well, we're going to take over anyway. Watch us. And then we're going to blame it on you. You made us do it. Okay. So, yeah, it's true. The reason that we teach empathy in the schools is the same reason we teach quantum mechanics, because they're obviously not getting it at home. What is so wrong about having empathy? And by the same token, why is Antifa and Black Lives Matter being blamed for the violence that's been perpetuated upon us by the right wing? Oh no, they burned down cities. They burned federal buildings to the ground. You know, here we are in Southern Oregon, and there's people that actually believe that Portland was burned to the ground, and the courthouse, the federal building courthouse, was just cinders. Because they saw the same, and I'm literally describing what happened. There was a literal dumpster fire in front of the courthouse, not even up against the wall of the courthouse, just in front of it. A dumpster on fire. The same dumpster fire was shown on TV over and over and over, and people down here think Portland was burned to the ground because, look, that's proof. That federal courthouse burned to the ground. Look at it, it's burning now. Okay. And it was Black Lives Matter and Antifa who caused the chaos and mayhem. When actually what happened was that a couple of grandmas who had permits to set up road barriers and direct traffic around a neighborhood were shot by some right-wing Proud Boy motherfuckers. Neo-Nazi fucks. 2 women in their 60s shot, 1 dead. Give me a break. That's what caused the mayhem. And I didn't even want to get into the discussion about the closely wedded nature of the Portland cops, and cops in general, shall we say, and right-wing groups like the Proud Boys, the 3 Percenters, etc., etc., etc. And that's not even bringing up the Boogaloo Boys, who literally killed cops in hopes of starting a race war so the right wing can take over. And they blamed it on Black Lives Matter and Antifa. See, they killed those cops. And those Boogaloo Boys are in prison as we speak, agitating for a race war just like Charles Manson, apparently. We'll blame it on the hippies. Let's not forget, Charles Manson was a Nazi, came out of prison. And I don't know, he doesn't seem like very charismatic to me. But maybe I'm predisposed not to follow icons, no matter what their stature. Napoleonic or, I don't know, Jolly Green Giant. Oh, I'm going to follow the Jolly Green Giant around because, oh, look how big he is. Yeah, right. So people calling for death, destruction, robbery, etc. never really appealed to me. Does that make me a square? Jeez. Oh, the only in crowds are those who are out there causing mayhem? Yeah, that's what it feels like around here sometimes. Fortunately, there are some people giving pushback. And I didn't even have to bring it up, but Project 2025 was brought up a number of times. Epstein logs, radio silence. Okay, well, you know, in a way, this is the way it should be. We need to turn on the light so these cockroaches, and I'm sorry, Am I dehumanizing a Nazi? Yes, I am. The cockroaches run from the light. We want them in the dark corners where they belong, back in the cesspool. They have no right to be here at the dining table of democracy. I know they came over on the ship of state because we didn't, quarantine enough, apparently. But that gives them no right to bring their toxic stew up to our table of democratic delight. I don't know where I'm going with this. It's Monday, but I'm having fun. Sorry. Okay. I saw one of those History Channel dual biographies of, this one was with Limbaugh and Howard Stern. The rise of shock. Yeah. I always liked Howard. I thought he was, I don't know, there was this, like I said, I don't really idolize anybody. I try not to. I will say Muhammad Ali was a hero. Willie Mays is a hero, etc. Wilt Chamberlain. Even though I had to say, I had to pull back a little bit on Wilt Chamberlain because he was kind of a player, misogynistic in a way. Yeah, he betted a lot of gals. Well, that was back in the day when everybody had to be playboys. Anyway, I had some heroes. Not to say that, oh yeah, no one's a hero. I came to that understanding because it's a folly. Always question authority, I suppose. Anyway. So, where are we going with this? I don't know. It's Monday. Anyway, why don't we step back and... let me give you a quick update on Precious. I don't know. I see Dr. Dickey tomorrow about Gunner. He's got to have some... I'm hoping he's lost some weight. It's hard to exercise this dog when it's 118 out. It's a freaking furnace. Yeah, it is. So I hope he's lost a little bit of weight, but he's got to be scheduled for surgery to his eyelids underneath are turning in, and so the hairs on the eyelid are scratching his eyes. So he's in a bit of agony, so we need to correct that in some way. But he needs to lose weight, and he does. So we'll have that checkup, and if he hasn't lost any weight, I got to cut back even more. And he's not happy that little Precious gets a lot of food because Dr. Dickey said feed her, and he doesn't, and he knows it. So I need to figure a way of giving him treats that won't put on any more pounds. Boy, or at least keep him at the same poundage. I need to lessen it. And one way to do that is give him some exercise, but good luck. I can't walk like that. I try. We'll see. Anyway, what do we have in store for you on this fine Monday morning? It's morning, so if it's on podcast when you're listening to this, well, it's Monday. Yes, it is. Well, Trump's prosecutions can still move forward despite the MAGA court's immunity ruling. Can you believe those guys, how brazen they are? What? Corrupt. FedSoc Mofo Heritage Foundation this. God, Okay. On the rest of the menu, Texas is still investigating migrant aid groups on the border in violation of a judge's scathing order because, Texas is their own independent republic. Yeah, stand on your own and see how much you need the United States to, survive. They don't care. They have a power grid that doesn't work, and they'll just kill their own citizens and when the power grid shuts down in the most needed times because, greed, money, and power. Hey, David went over this, but I think that we need to reaffirm it, that the Kansas Supreme Court strongly reaffirmed that the state constitution protects abortion access. But as David intimated, Russ never sleeps. So we got to keep working to make sure, those corrosive elements are put back into the nether regions and back into their toxic stew where they belong, their own. As we wait for a big old truck to go by, because it's pretty loud here. I don't know how it was for you, but it was pretty loud for me. Finishing up here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy today, Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey announced the formation of a new panel charged with guiding the state's transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy. MAGA up here in the land of renewable energy for some reason is really upset that these liberal policies won't let us continue burning as much fossil fuel as we can. Well, we already are. There's just not much going to be left. How do you like them apples? Idiots. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I told them they cannot out-redneck me. I grew up in redneck land, and I know the lingo. Okay. Maybe not just the lingo. Finishing up here after the break, we move to the chef's table where a coalition of the French left beat back a far-right surge. How? By winning the most seats in the high-stakes snap election, because nobody likes the fascists. Nobody. And if you like the fascists, that's why. And Hungary's Orban made a surprise visit to China after trips to Russia and Ukraine. What is he up to? I have my suspicions. I know you have yours. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. As is our wont, we will tuck right into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and it is by Valerie Gonzalez out of the Associated Press. Texas is widening its investigations into aid organizations along the U.S.-Mexico border over claims that nonprofits are helping migrants illegally enter the country, taking some groups to court and making demands that a judge called harassment after the state tried shuttering an El Paso shelter. The efforts are led by Republican Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, you know, that mobbed-up crook, whose office has defended the state's increasingly aggressive actions on the border, including razor wire barriers and a law that would allow police to arrest migrants who enter the U.S. illegally. Since February, Paxton has asked for documents from at least 4 groups in Texas that provide shelter and food to migrants. That includes one of the largest migrant aid organizations in Texas, Catholic Charities, which on Wednesday last asked a court to stop what the group called a fishing expedition into a pond where no one has ever seen a fish. The scrutiny from the state has not stopped the organization's work, but leaders of some groups say the investigations have caused some volunteers to leave and worry it will cast a chilling effect among those working to help migrants in Texas, which Ken Paxton and all the rest of his mobbed-up right-wing, shall I say, MAGA cronies say exactly. That's exactly what we want. Hannah of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. Kansas's highest court strongly reaffirmed that the state constitution protects abortion access, striking down a ban on a common second trimester procedure and laws regulating abortion providers more strictly than other health care providers. The pair of 5-1 decisions suggest that other restrictions, even ones decades on the books, might not withstand legal challenges. The court's dissenting justice, widely seen as its most conservative, warned that Kansas is headed toward a, quote, legal regime of unrestricted access to abortion. Well, you know what, lady? Abortion is health care. That's another discussion I had with some of the MAGA folk around here. They do not believe that. And we know that they don't believe that, but hey, it still is. Let's see here. She continued, this is then a quote from Nancy Northrup, President and CEO of the Center for Reproductive Rights, which represented the abortion providers challenging the two laws, said that this is an immense victory for the health, safety, and dignity of people in Kansas and the entire Midwestern region where millions have been cut off from abortion access. The decision comes almost 2 years after an August 22 statewide vote decisively affirming abortion rights, the first such vote after the MAGA court's Dobbs decision in June of 2022 that allowed states to ban abortion altogether. Kansas voters rejected a proposed change in the state constitution approved by the Republican-controlled legislature to declare the document provides no right to abortion. Chris Kobach's office, he's the AG, had argued the 22 vote did not matter in determining whether the two laws could stand, but Justice Evelyn Wilson, one of the 3 justices appointed to the 7-member court after its landmark 2019 decision, said that while she might have dissented then, the people spoke with their votes. Of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey announced the formation of a new panel charged with guiding the state's transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy. The Energy Transformation Advisory Board includes representatives of labor, business, finance, and environmental justice advocacy organizations, as well as utilities, building owners, and developers. The board will advise the newly established Office of Energy Transformation, which has been given the task of affordably and responsibly accelerating the state's gas-to-electric transition and readying the electric grid to meet the state's climate and clean energy mandates. The office has already announced 3 of its top goals: transitioning away from the Everett Marine Terminal liquefied natural gas facility, decarbonizing how the state meets peak electric demand, and establishing alternative mechanisms to finance the clean energy transition. As always, check out all these articles in their totality by linking up at the show notes and links diaries that I have provided on my social media feeds that get you to those Daily Coast diaries. So check it out. We are now going to go to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world. And we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, if you've ever wondered where the aliens from the A Quiet Place franchise hail, or why they chose to invade the Earth, you aren't going to find the answers in A Quiet Place Day One. While technically a prequel to the others, there's little here that ties it to the other films besides the aforementioned sound-attracted critters. Set in New York City rather than the rural settings of the previous two, Day One focuses on a terminally ill cancer patient, Sam, and the people she encounters as the world literally changes forever within hours. Sam, played by the always wonderful Lupita Nyong'o, is the patient who hasn't yet come to terms with her condition. Indeed, one of the strengths of the film is that Sam's illness doesn't define her character. Instead, thanks largely to Nyong'o's work, she's portrayed as a complex, shrewd, and at times angry young woman who just happens to be dying. The fact that even in the face of her prognosis, Sam doesn't just curl up and surrender illustrates one of the themes of the franchise: the strength of the human will to live, even in dire circumstances. Along for the journey is Sam's faithful cat Frodo, a memorable animal actor if ever there was one, and a young law student Eric, who, like Sam, also seems to have no family and no idea what's coming next. Given that the aliens track their prey by sound, so no one can speak lest they end up dead, much of A Quiet Place Day One plays like a silent film. In lesser hands, this might have been an issue, but new director Michael Sarnowski and the amazing Nyong'o bring it off with flair. Together, this is arguably the best of the franchise so far, with plenty of questions and adventures still ahead. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Arthritis is common among veterans. Traumatic and overuse injuries during active duty are risk factors for developing arthritis. Fortunately, there are low-cost or no-cost strategies that can help veterans manage arthritis. Physical activity can reduce pain and improve function. It can also help improve mood and play a role in managing other chronic conditions, such as heart disease, diabetes, and obesity. You can do low-impact activities, such as walking, biking, swimming, and water aerobics, all good forms of exercise. Arthritis-specific classes can help you get started. Information on classes, exercise programs, and tools are available at cdc.gov/arthritis. These resources can help reduce pain and improve function. Learning self-management techniques can help all veterans become more active, improve their overall quality of life, and thrive.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Read the dissent. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. In the recent Supreme Court decision on gerrymandering from South Carolina, 6 justices approved of the legislature having pushed black voters into the one predominantly black and Democratic district in order to make the district where those voters had been securely white and securely Republican. In other words, wipe out the second majority minority district. Theoretically, racial gerrymandering is unconstitutional, but now a state can engage in racial gerrymandering if it can invent some vaguely plausible pretext for the race-based decision. The only non-racial reason that South Carolina offered was that the legislature was engaged only in overtly partisan gerrymandering to create another Republican seat, which this Supreme Court previously has ruled was just fine. In the South Carolina case, the 3 district court judges who heard the witnesses and reviewed mountains of evidence ruled that the state's decision was based on race. Under centuries of precedent, those findings would have been binding on an appellate court. But not here, no longer, not in a gerrymandering challenge. Rather, the government is entitled to a huge presumption in its favor. Justice Kagan concludes, quote, "In the electoral sphere especially, where ugly patterns of pervasive racial discrimination have so long governed, we should demand better. Of ourselves, of our political representatives, and most of all, of this court." The problem with the quite brilliant dissent is, well, it's the dissent. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government by and for the people. This week, we're looking at the reasons why people don't vote. A 2020 survey by political research site 538.com found that many just don't like the candidate. Some have to wait in line for hours, and some, well, they just don't think their vote makes a difference. In fact, a perception that voting wouldn't make a difference is one of the biggest reasons that people don't bother to vote. Another survey by NPR, also done in 2020, looked at that in detail. It found that 80% of non-voters thought that traditional parties and politicians didn't care about them, and 66% thought that voting in elections didn't really affect how decisions were made in the country. And 53% of non-voters said it didn't matter who was elected president because nothing would really change for people like them. Both surveys found that the number of non-voters increased as income decreased. NPR found that in household incomes of $50,000 or less, 43% of citizens surveyed were non-voters. 52% of non-voters don't have a high school education. Non-voters are likely to be young and more likely not to be married. Non-voters in both surveys said that they were more likely to vote if Election Day were a national holiday, as proposed in the Freedom to Vote Act and John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. Both bills were blocked by conservatives in the U.S. Senate. Links to articles and the surveys can be found at AmericanDemocracyMinute.org. For the American Democracy Minute, I'm Brian Beal.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1939. That was the day AFL President William Greene called all affiliates to meet in Chicago. Greene sought to mobilize union leaders in a fight to restore prevailing wages on federal relief projects. Building tradesmen on WPA construction sites had started walking off the job in spontaneous strikes across the country 3 days earlier. The strike spread rapidly to 36 states, quickly turning into a nationwide walkout of over 150,000. Workers were outraged by provisions in the latest federal relief bill titled the Woodrum Act. New terms established the 130-hour rule, essentially slashing wages by more than half. It also called for a 30-day dismissal of all workers who had been on WPA rolls for 18 months. The AFL Building Trades Department stated the act would, quote, destroy national wage standards established through 50 years of collective bargaining. IBEW leader Daniel Tracy added that forcing a lower wage on federal relief workers would only aid building contractors in private industry to do the same. From St. Louis to Rochester, from Minneapolis to Akron, picket lines were solid. Organizers worked to build solidarity among unskilled WPA workers affected by the new starvation bill. Tens of thousands of strikers were fired in WPA-ordered dismissals. President Roosevelt declared there could be no strikes against the federal government. Attorney General Frank Murphy former Michigan governor during the Flint sit-down strike, declared that striking against the government would build a fascist psychology. WPA administrators also threatened organizers with federal prosecution, fines, and jail time. But New York's Building and Construction Trades Council leader Thomas Murray authorized a strike of 32,000. He avowed, "This will be a strike to the finish."
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where we are experiencing a pretty much West Coast-wide excessive heat warning. Looks like we are currently about 68 degrees, and we are expecting highs, record temps. Oh, they've taken the record temperatures off. We're only going to be up to around 110 today, which means we'll be about 115 here at the mothership. Northwest winds at less than 5 miles per hour this morning, increasing to 10 to 15 miles per hour later on. A clear sky overnight with lows in the mid to upper 60s, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10. Sunny skies tomorrow with near record high temperatures, highs around 108 to 110. Winds out of the northwest at 10 to 15 miles per hour. And we expect temperatures in the 100, bumping 110 for the rest of the week. Darn it. Oh, it looks like actually around Thursday we're expecting to be in the upper 90s. Oh, we'll have to get a sweater, won't we? Grass pollen is rated high, and I can attest to that, or whatever it is out there that's kicking my rear. The air quality index, though, is in the moderate range at 59 parts per million, so we've had very good airs, and it means that the wildfires in the region are now starting to back up and get into our area. Darn! That daytime UV index remains very high at level 9. It is summertime. Take care. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.91 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles. And relative humidity is at 53%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. It is. London is 64 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 76 and sunny with a thunderstorm advisory. Rome is 90 degrees and sunny with a heat warning. Kabul is 77 and fair. Hong Kong is 82 and cloudy. Tokyo is 85 and clear. Tokyo is 85 and clear, that's right. Auckland, New Zealand is 53 degrees and cloudy. San Francisco, California is 58 and mostly cloudy with a small craft advisory. Chicago, Illinois is 77 and partly cloudy. And New York is 88 degrees Fahrenheit, sunny with a heat warning. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. John Leicester, Laurie Hinott, and Sylvie Corbet, working the world desk of the Associated Press, brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. A coalition of the French left won the most seats in the high-stakes legislative elections yesterday, Sunday, beating back a far-right surge, but failing to win a majority. The outcome left France, a pillar of the EU and Olympic host country, facing the stunning prospect of a hung parliament and political paralysis. The turmoil could rattle markets and the French economy, the EU's second largest, and have far-ranging implications for the war in Ukraine, global diplomacy, and Europe's economic stability. In calling the election on June 9th, after the far-right surged in French voting for the European Parliament, Macron said turning to voters again would provide clarification. On almost every level, that gamble appears to have backfired. What? Okay, according to the official results released early today, all three main blocs fell far short of the 289 seats to control the 577-seat National Assembly, the more powerful of France's two legislative chambers. Well, I am sorry. It is a resounding success, because by every measure, the right was expected to goose-step all over France and Europe. They are not. They have been held at bay. And when the French vote again, which I should let people know, over 64%, which is an astounding number, and we don't even come close to that. 64% voted. And by all expectations on the ground, don't listen to the polls. When they vote again, it's going to be even more. And the bloc of leftists, quote, leftists, is really the vast middle. Do not kid ourselves. The right wing and the Nazis are on the run. All they can do is lie. Simona Mistranu at the World Desk of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Chinese President Xi Jinping called on world powers to help Russia and Ukraine resume direct dialogue during a meeting with Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban. Orban made a surprise visit to China after similar trips last week to Russia and Ukraine to discuss prospects for a peaceful settlement of more than the 2-year war. Hungary assumed the rotating presidency of the European Union this month, and Orban has since embarked on a peace mission which, however, lacks the endorsement of the other European leaders. Orban is widely seen as having the warmest relations with Xi and Russian President Vladimir Putin among European leaders. His visit to Moscow last week drew condemnation from Kyiv and EU officials who insisted Orban was not acting on behalf of the whole European bloc. I'm sure he gave Xi Vlad's side of how they can achieve peace. I say how they can achieve peace is for Vladimir Putin to unconditionally surrender and give back everything they took in the Donbass back in 2014. How about that? Their rebuke failed to deter Orban, they being the other EU leaders, from extending a similar visit to Beijing, which he called Peace Mission 3.0. During his meeting with Xi, Orban described China as a stabilizing force amid global turbulence and praised its constructive and important peace initiatives, like its saber-rattling with Taiwan, the building of all those military islands all across the China Sea and into international waters. Yeah, peace initiatives. That brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, thankfully, and so do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.